Maximize your yields while spreading out your workload with the earliest maturing winter cereal. Visit kws.com/CA to see how our hybrid rye varieties can work for you. High yields, high quality, high value for your farm. KWS, seeding the future since 1856.
Welcome back to Real Ag Radio. I am your host, Lindsay Smith, and joining me now to talk about hogs, pork, all things pig, it's Christine McCracken. She's Executive Director for Animal Protein with Rabobank. Hello, Christine. Welcome here.
Hey, great to be with you.
All right, we can talk about other proteins too, but let's focus mostly on the hog markets. So what right now, we're in the middle of July, what's happening right now in the hog markets?
Well, it's been a pretty disappointing summer. The reality is that in a lot of parts of, especially through the Midwest, it was a little cooler. We had a little more mild weather, a little different than we have now, maybe. But the hogs grew really well. So they put on a lot of weight. We pulled some hogs forward, and that put a lot of pressure on the markets. I think that comes at the same time that we're seeing a little softer demand. I think primarily at food service, it seems like, for some of that breakfast food, it doesn't line up very well, maybe with what we're seeing in terms of record travel numbers. We thought it'd be a little better. But it is interesting that I think some of the food service companies might be cutting back a little on how many slices of bacon they offer you on that breakfast sandwich, or a little smaller portions. I think that is filtering in a little bit into the demand picture. But overall, a little disappointing as we come through the summer here.
Mm-hmm. Now, on a global scale, have we seen any big shifts on that demand side as well?
It's been a little soft from an export perspective into Japan, just because the yen has been so soft or so weak relative to the Canadian dollar, US dollar. It's been a really tough go for them. Otherwise, not a lot of big moves. I think, in general, we're seeing pretty good export demand, only from the perspective that European hog production's down so much. So there's a lot of kind of room for US and Canadian pork exports into the global market. So it's been a pretty good export picture across the board, in large part because of that drop in European availability, but not any other big moves like we've seen here in North America.
Mm-hmm. Do we know why the European hog production is down so much?
Yeah, there's a few factors that really played into that. Namely, they'd gone through that same period of real economic weakness coming out of COVID, and some really high feed costs, similar to what we saw here. But then, at the same time, they got African swine fever in Germany that really limited their ability to trade, to export pork. That was a factor. And then at the same time, they've had some regulation that has limited their ability not just to expand, but is actually kind of forcing producers to exit. And that really has contributed to that kind of, multi-pronged decline in pork production.
I don't know about you, but I've traveled to Germany. They eat a lot of pork. So it is a little surprising to think that a country that eats that much pork would be scaling back, but African swine fever being one of those factors that thankfully in North America we're not dealing with, but I would imagine that makes for some very anxious times in the hog industry in Germany.
Yeah, it's interesting though. They haven't lost that. They've been able to keep the African swine fever largely out of the commercial herd, so it hasn't had as much of an impact on production. What is surprising though is to see the pretty sharp declines in pork consumption within Germany. If you look at the demographic trends, a lot of the younger generation just not eating as much pork as they did historically. So, it's such an important part of their culture and part of their diet, but at the same time, we're seeing kind of this reversal of trend. So it's something we're watching. Obviously, things can turn around, but for now, not very hopeful here in the short run for Germany.
For Germany, that's right. Okay, now here at home, so here in Canada, we got word last week that I don't know, maybe as an insider, you would have seen this coming, but we certainly didn't here at Real Agriculture. But Maple Leaf Foods announcing that they are spinning off their pork production side into its own entity. Your thoughts on that, why this might be a good time to do that, where a company might see an advantage to doing that right now?
Yeah, unfortunately, I was not in the room when they made the decision, but and I hate to comment on what their real motivation might be specifically. What I can say about the industry broadly is that it's a really tough business. It tends to be somewhat cyclical, and for a public company that likes to have some stability in margins and maybe not all of the commodity fluctuations. That might be part of the motivation behind spinning it out. And two, it takes a lot of focus, right? A management focus, a lot of time. It's a little different maybe than some of the consumer goods, uh, you know, companies out there, like the bulk of the remainder of their business, right?
Yeah.
And they still have that really strong relationship as it's set up, at least in the filing. So, as we think about it, maybe big picture, timing wise, I don't know as though there's any real there's never a really good time, maybe to do this. There certainly isn't anything structural about the changes happening in the industry today, but it might be about the focus that business needs, and then also maybe thinking about how it may impact the overall share price relative to that. That's just my high
Yeah.
level thoughts there.
And we haven't been able to talk to them yet, and I don't know that they would tell us anyway. But internally, we sort of talked about the fact that certainly by creating a second or a standalone company, I mean, it could potentially mean that that company could now sell to what would have been considered competition on the hog side, which maybe would help even out some of those ebbs and flows. That's, some speculation, but realistically, to your point about the hog industry being a tough one, amen to that. It is, I don't know, hog farmers, you have my full respect because it's a roller coaster.
It's been a really tough go, and certainly it's going to be hard for them too. I think though with the focus they'll be able to put on that business and hopefully, maybe attract some strong shareholders that are really interested in growing that business and developing it as a standalone. Certainly the company is still involved, in the family, but there may be some other motivations strategically down the road.
All right. Christine, thank you so much for joining me on the show today.
Sure thing. Great to be with you.